Let me read to you a passage from the 17th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 11 to 19. It's the Gospel for Wednesday of the 32nd week in Ordinary Time. St. Luke writes, As Jesus continued his journey to Jerusalem, he travelled through Samaria and Galilee. As he was entering a village, 10 lepers met him. They stood at a distance from him and raised their voice, saying, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. And when he saw them, he said, Go and show yourselves to the priests. As they were going, they were cleansed. And one of them, realizing he had been healed, returned, glorifying God in a loud voice. And he fell at the feet of Jesus and thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus said in reply, 10 were cleansed. Were they not? Where are the other 9? That's from Luke chapter 17, verse 11 to 19. We are led to think of the leprosy of sin. What do I mean? Well, consider the beauty of our gospel scene that I've just read. But consider its forlorn beginning as our Lord entered this village on the border between Samaria and Galilee. There were 10 lepers banded together in their hopeless condition. It seems that leprosy has affected humanity for over 4,000 years. It was recognized in many ancient civilizations, such as those of China, Egypt, India, and as is clear from the scriptures, in Israel. Until the 1940s, there was no effective cure for leprosy, but even then, due to the evolution of antibiotic resistance by the 1960s, the world's only known anti-leprosy drug became virtually useless. Since then, great progress has been made, and leprosy is now largely controllable and even curable through multi-drug therapy. But in ancient times, it was a cause of terror and the worst depression. A person was doomed if he contracted the disease. Infected with this terrible plight which cut them off from all others, lepers banded together for mutual support and friendship. Such was the situation of our gospel scene that I read earlier. There they were, perhaps holding one another for mutual support and guidance, keeping their required distance from the populace. Suddenly, the only one who could help them drew near, and they cried out to him, asking for pity. It is surely an image of a far more deadly disease which affects us profoundly, not only now, but forever hereafter. That disease is sin. And there is only one who can liberate us from it, Jesus Christ. The events of our gospel passage today constitute a parable about sin and its cleansing, about the merciful power of Christ and his mission to bring redemption to afflicted man. His almighty power was manifested in his pity and mercy, and all 10 were cleansed as they made their way to show themselves to the priests as the law of Moses required. But the climax of the passage comes in the reaction of the lepers themselves to their own cleansing. What indeed had happened to the other 9? Where were they? They had gone off rejoicing and had completely forgotten the giver of the gift. It was a Samaritan, a heretic, one who did not practice the true and revealed religion, who returned glorifying and praising God and thanking Jesus. The spectacle of this Samaritan at the feet of Jesus thanking him is beautiful indeed. Our question could immediately be, are we like this Samaritan, or are we like the other 9? Leprosy was acquired. It was not a condition into which a person was born. Once contracted, its power was virtually complete, and it was just a matter of time before the entire human system collapsed, with the sufferer powerless before the terrible onslaught. It was an image of what was a far more terrible disease into which every person was and is born. Our sinful condition, understood as separation from God and as a tendency to will this separation, is not contracted after birth, though it is indeed intensified by our personal sins. It is an inherited spiritual condition. Its origin lies in the distant past, in a terrible act of rebellion against God by the first human couple, our original ancestors. Its result was that death entered the human race, as St. Paul writes. This death was not merely some kind of termination to this life, but the disintegration, physical and spiritual, of the human being, together with all that leads to this. We ought, in the presence of Jesus, ask ourselves if we are aware of the predicament we are in by nature because of our inherited sinful condition. This is quite apart from the even more terrible fact of personal sin. At least the lepers were well aware of the physical predicament they were in. Because we have been baptized into Christ, we are not completely under the power of sin, of course, but to the extent that we have not given ourselves to his friendship, to that extent are we in the grip of the leprosy of sin. Sin is the one great ogre we must do away with. If we do not, it will do away with us. To the extent that we have not renounced sin, to that extent are we under its power. Pope Pius XII taught that the characteristic sin of our age is the loss of the sense of sin. The lepers understood their predicament, but do we? It is only Christ our Lord who can cleanse us. Now, just as he drew near and liberated the lepers from their terrible disease, so too within the Church's body, by means of the sacraments and his word, he draws near to us to liberate us of our sinful situation. Grace is constantly available to us, and we ought seek and receive this grace with a lively faith. When received, our response ought be that of the Samaritan leper, who returned glorifying God and thanking our Lord. That is to say, together with the sense of sin, there ought be in our life an abiding attitude of praise for all that God has done for us in the person of his divine Son. Every day our attitude to our Lord ought to be like that of the grateful Samaritan leper, but especially at that highest moment for offering God thanks and praise, which is the Mass, when we unite ourselves with our Lord in his prayer of self-offering to the Father. The foundation of all religion is humility, and humility is the foundation of all authentic Christian holiness. How can we grow in humility? We'll start by being deeply grateful and full of enduring praise for the work of God in us. He has saved us from sin and has called and empowered us to be like his Son.